So good evening, everyone. And thanks a lot to Bharat and Team Khaki for inviting me to give this talk. Although the title of the talk is hashtagged as money and mint condition, what exactly I'm going to talk about is a kind of an early phase of the East India Company's mint at Mumbai, and how it did affect what was going on at that time, and how money helped East India Company to gain its ground or not. What was exactly going on in those very early days, soon after Bombay was taken over by the East India Company. So I'll start my presentation, sharing the screen. So these are the years that we're going to see. It starts at about 1672 and goes on to the story about, say, 1715. What these two dates mark are important money-related events in the history of Mumbai. So that's why this has been bracketed to these two particular dates. You are all very familiar with the early history of Bombay, and as we know that the name was derived from Mumba, the mother goddess worshipped by the fisher folk. We have history going back to about 10th or 12th century, and settlement of the main islands around Bombay was done in the Shilahara and Yadava periods. Then it was followed by the rules of the Sultans of Delhi, and eventually when the Sultanate of Delhi broke down, we had Sultans of Gujarat ruling in the 14th and 16th centuries. A significant shift happens in around 1530s, between 1530s and 1540s, when the Portuguese take over this particular part of the western coast from the Sultans of Gujarat in their war that was going on with Sultan Bahadur of Gujarat. The next important event is the marriage of Charles II with Catherine of Braganza, who was the Princess of Portugal, and that caused the city of Bombay to get transferred to Britain, along with Tangier, which is now in Morocco. And this treaty was concluded on 23rd of June, 1661. It took about 4 years for Bombay to be actually handed over. The Portuguese were not letting it go very fast. And the handover to the Brits happened in 1665. Then the king rents Bombay to the East India Company on 27th of March, 1668. And this is where the company sort of gets it. And this is the annual rent of about £10 a year. They get the possession of Bombay to conduct their trade and create an office there, as it were, to create a factory which actually belonged to them. This is very interesting because at this point, Bombay was actually under fully British control. Bombay was actually part of Britain, as it were. And in the king's manorial estates, it was part of the manor of East Greenwich, which was then situated in Kent. Now it's part of the kind of a borough of Eastern London. So Bombay and London have a strange geographic connection and historic connection in this manner, in a way. So what were the British doing at this time in Bombay? This was something that is regarded by historians as the age of mercantilism, and the idea of mercantilism dominated the kind of economic life around and thinking around this time. And the dominant theme in this particular concept of mercantilism was that it's all up to trade. If you trade, trade brings profit, and profits bring the nation who's indulging in trade. The profits then contribute to the wealth of the nation, as it were. This was again economically. This theory was challenged and revised, as we know very famously, in the late 18th century by Adam Smith, who said profits through trade do not actually contribute to wealth. It is actually manufacturing that adds to the nation's wealth. So it's generating of this wealth is linked with not just trading in commodities, but actually generating and manufacturing the commodities yourself. And very earlier on, we see that the East India Company was running into trouble with cash flow, because there was a lot of state involvement in this company. A lot of people from the court of earlier the Tudor court and the Stuart court both were involved in this trade, and they decided to sort of partake the profits of the trade in a way. So, for example, we know that in 1619, there was not enough metal left in London to strike coins because all the precious metals had been diverted into providing payments for this trade. So this was some sort of a mercantile mania at this time, that people were thinking that this is going to be the new in thing, as it were, and then we're going to get very wealthy because of this thing. Of course, in India, there were local rulers at this time, and they had to be appeased, as it were, to let them trade. I mean, there was this mighty Mughal empire that was in place. So a series of agencies embassies was sent to India. The first one was Ralph Finch, then followed by John Milton Hall, and most famously in the second decade of the 17th century by Sir Thomas Roe, who visited very famously the court of Jahangir in Agra and then subsequently in Ajmer. As a result of that, they were allowed to establish a trading port, sort of outpost at Surat. However, there were other players in the political spectrum as well, which needed the same sort of treatment. I mean, this was not all concerned with only the Mughals. So the Adil Shahis were another sort of political power of dominance, in particularly in South and Western India. And the British sought to lease the ports of Dabhol and Rajapur, which are in Maharashtra, western coast, Konkan. They were leased from Adil Shahis for establishment of these factories of trade. Of course, one can imagine that trade happens with money, and money is integral part of the whole trade picture, as it were. They found very earlier on, they found that there were problems with the currency. Of course, they had their own money. They had pound, shilling, pence, whatever that was. But in India, of course, the rupee dominated, and because the rupee was connected with the Mughal ideal of kingship. The Mughal king was an Islamic king, and Islamic kings should have coins stuck in their name. That is one of the kind of proofs that they're kings, and this is their right. This is the right of Sikha. The right to strike coins in one's name is a kind of one of the fundamental rights that constitutes Islamic kingship. So the fact that there were rupees circulating in India at this time, and they were issued by the Mughals, was very, very important. And the Mughals had established a very fine currency system. Their rupees were very trustworthy. They were of all uniform weight, of all uniform silver content. So they were very trustworthy. They were very popular. So the rupee was dominated. And this is controlled strictly by the Mughals. And when I mean to say control, what it means that the British were not allowed to strike their own rupees, as it were, or they were not allowed to trade in their own currencies that they were bringing with them. They had to sort of change the silver that they were bringing into rupees to make payments to various interests that they were trading with. And this created two sorts of problems. The first problem was that they always found that the mints were very slow. The mint masters were lazy, lethargic. They had access to grind. They sort of had whims and fancies. So basically, time on British hands, or anybody who was trading in Western India at this time, was quite short, because they were dependent on the monsoons to go to play their ships, and everything had to be done in 4 months. And if they don't get their money, how were they going to conduct the trade? So right from earlier on, we see that there is a constant kind of tension between the local people, the local money suppliers, as it were, the mint, as well as the other aspect in here was the money changers, or shroffs, who were perennial interlopers identified as. And they always tried to discount the money. So basically, they had their own ideas about how money circulated, and they had to be they were the intermediaries. They were the persons who were actually exchanging money. They were taking the British money and giving them rupees in return. So there was this particular tension between the shroffs as well. So in general, the money situation was not something that the British actually liked very much, and they tried to get around it by various means and ways. And of course, the only place that they could do it was a place that genuinely belongs to them in full. And there was no such place on Western India apart from Bombay. When Bombay actually did belong to them, it belonged to the king. It was given to the king by the Portuguese. It had no connection with the local kind of ruling entities, apart from the fact that the local rulers were very important and they'd like to throw their weight around once in a while. In addition to that, the company also found out that the coins themselves were a profitable sort of business. You could get silver or copper as metal and make coins out of it, and those coins would be struck at a making charge. So that was profit, in making that. So, and there was always a demand for coins. People liked to use coins in their transactions. People did not prefer non-monetary transactions, like using non-monetary exchange media, like suparis or bitter almonds or something like that. They wanted to use coins in actually while conducting their trade. So there was a demand for coins. So coins themselves became an article of trade in a way. So this is the kind of the kind of realm that the British are functioning in. So when they come to Bombay in 17th century, they find that obviously the local currency that was circulating was based on the Portuguese system, because the Portuguese were the erstwhile masters of the islands. The accounts were kept in monies such as jarafins, larins, and reis. These were all sort of local monies. The actual money in circulation were jarafins, pies, and something called bazarucos. And these were small tin coins, which were made from tin alloy. And actually the word bazaruko comes from the Persian bazaar, market, and ruk, which means small change. So small change that was current in the market was called bazarukos or bazaruks. The jarafin was a silver coin, which is equivalent to a rupee, and it was a Portuguese kind of rupee coin. The pice was copper, and the bazaruko, as I've just said, was made out of a tin-based alloy. In addition to that, there were Mughal rupees, which was chiefly from Surat Mint, which was circulating, and also other coins, which were around 6 grams in weight, and they were called Mahmudis. And they were struck by a local Raja who was ruling sort of in Khandesh, in the province of Baglana. And this was a staple currency in northwest parts of Maharashtra and South Gujarat at this time. They were circulating, they were mainly used in South Gujarat and also therefore in Surat. So that was circulating as well. A few examples of what these coins looked like are here. On top left is the silver coin with the cross on. That's the Portuguese jarafim. And you can see that it is a very Western looking coin design. It has a shield, and it has GA on the either side of the shield, which stand for Goa. They were minted in Goa. Some of them were minted in Daman as well, which is not far from Mumbai. We really don't know whether whether any were actually minted in Bombay. I mean, like there was Vasai, which is very a major Portuguese trading center in Bombay, near Bombay. But we don't have any accounts of the mint at Vasai striking silver coins. So most likely the coins that were circulating were being struck in Goa, the main Portuguese colony, and then being sent here. The copper coin on the top right is a Mughal paisa. This is a paisa of Aurangzeb, and it is struck in the mint of Surat. This is the kind of staple Mughal currency that was circulating in these parts. The coin in the center is a small lead coin, or tin coin, sorry. And this is the bazaruk. This is the small tin coin that was being circulated. Again, this is a Portuguese coin. So it has the same sort of design elements that you see on the jarafin. It has got the cross on one side and the shield on the other side. Again, very Portuguese in their appearance. The strange coin that you see on the top, the bottom left is the larin. And this was a very funny looking coin. This was coin that was shaped like a hairpin. And this was done to actually make them manufacture very quickly. I won't go into details of how that happens, but it is actually quicker to manufacture these coins than to make them round. It was basically, they were taking a piece of wire which was cut by length and then folded over and struck on either sides. And these coins were mainly struck in the southern part of the Persian Gulf originally to start with, but at this time, it was a stable silver currency of the sultans of Bijapur, Adil Shahi sultans of Bijapur, and they were being issued from the port of Dabol, where there was a mint for making these coins. Last but not the least, the bottom right coin is the Mahmudi that I just mentioned. These were coins struck by the local Raja of Baglana in northwest Maharashtra. And they actually were struck in the name of Akbar, even though Akbar had been dead by this time for more than 50 years. They sort of carried on with the Akbar design, and this design was constantly carried on for about 200 years after the death of Akbar. It's just one of these kind of phenomenon in Indian coinage that you see sometimes, that when a particular design gets popular, people just start imitating it, to the end. So that is these are the kind of coins that were circulating in Bombay before the British came over. And soon after, as I said, in very earlier on in 1668, even when the island was not transferred to the East India Company, Henry Gary, the king's representative on the island in 1668, mentions that there is a very great need for small money here. And then he says, if you agree, I can start a mint here, because it's actually profitable to have these coins, and then to make to make money out of money, really, in a funny way. And he gives this kind of an equivalence, that they call it pice here, which is 13 3/4 make a shilling, and the tin are called bazarukos, and of which 16 bazarukos go for 1 pice. This is the excerpt from Henry Gary's memorandum that was sent in 1668. Then it sort of, this story sort of continues in 1668. In October, a report to London that was sent from Bombay statement was included that it would be expedient also to procure a stamp for copper and tin for small money of exchange, and of which there is a great demand for this on the island. Then, this is harped on, they carry on. I mean, one of the things that one sees in the East India Company early records is this whole question of bureaucracy as well. When you got to do something, you got to actually press the higher ups with many, constant memoranda and reminders and letters saying that what you want to do. And then typically for a management, they take, slow decisions, and, everybody's frustrated down the line, and, so this is constantly being harped on. And they said that we need this license. It would be quite nice if you have our own coins, because we have been having problems with the Shroffs, the mint master in Surat. And so if we actually start making our own coins, this will be helpful for us to conduct our trade. Finally, in 1671, we have the first kind of okay from the directors in London, say to Surat, we do think it is convenient for us to have a coin of our own there that means Bombay, and therefore we would like you to consider such a coin. And but they also say at the same time that please make sure that whatever coins you strike are acceptable, and they get into circulation, people trust them. And if you actually strike gold and silver, high value coins, make sure that they have the intrinsic value as it is what it says, on the coin. Really, I mean, don't fool around with the contents of the metal, which was a kind of a way of extracting, extra profit. Because it is our honor to actually strike, proper coins, and it would help if you actually keep to good standards here. It will keep our esteem as well. So. And they also say that you better start coining with gold or silver, and then we can consider you coin any copper or other metal. So you start with that. So 1671 is the real first indication that we find that the East India Company is interested in having a mint at Bombay. Things start moving very fast. In January 1672, we find a name of a person called Richard Adams, who's appointed in charge of the mint. So there is the talk of, not just the talk of a mint, it's been sort of conceived. There is an administrative division of the mint, and Richard Adams actually has been appointed as the in charge. Then in September and October 1672, there are mentions that we find in the records. By the way, all these records are taken from disparate sources. They are taken mainly from the research conducted by Dr. Paul Stevens, who spent an inordinate number of days in the British Library trawling through these records. And some of them are published as in collections such as Fawcett, which is a famous collection of English factory records. But some of them are actually glossed from actual documents, such as letters or public committee consultations or whatever. So I owe a great deal to Dr. Paul Stevens, who's been able to find all this information in the actual archives. So in September and October 1672, we find first mentions of bullion, which is being kept aside. So we see that there is a copper consignment that is arriving, and it is said that in the copper, what we have not sold, we intend to coin into pies for the use of your island. So this is the first intention voiced. And they again, profit is everything. So they said, which we hope also will turn you a profit. This is what they are in for. They're doing everything for profit really at this time. Then in 1672 of November of 1672, we find an interesting character called Sir John Child, who's appointed in charge of the mint. Adams goes out and John Child comes in. And John Child is a very interesting character because he is kind of top brass in a way, because he's related to Sir Joshua Child, who's one of the directors back in London. Then he also subsequently ended up being the governor of Mumbai in the 1680s, and is very famous, known for starting the first ever war of the British against the Mughals at this time. So this was this character who was appointed as in charge of the mint at this time. And at this time, we also know that the mint was to be erected at this time is in a building called East India House, because the right kind of place or convenient room in the fort was not actually available at this time. So there was this other place called the East India House where the mint was being set up. And when the convenient room in fort, particularly for coining of silver, which is a precious metal, was available, the mint was going to function from this place called East India House. On 29th of November records, we find an interesting detail that they actually gave names to these coins, what they were going to strike. So the gold coins were supposed to be called Carolina, which was in honor of King Charles, whose Latin name was Carolus. So the Carolina name came from the king. The silver coins were called to be called Anglina, which is of course the name of England, as it were. And the copper and the tin coins were known because they were more humble. They were known by names of metals. The copper ones were called copperoons, and the tin coins were called tinnies. In December 1672, after all this, finally, Gerald Ongier, who was the governor of Bombay at this time, reports to London and actually sends coins that he struck there. So we know that by December of 1672, the coins were actually struck. And he says, this has been taken such a long time because, first of all, we had to settle debts. So many times when you sent us the bullion, it had to be sent to Surat because we had to make payments there, and we were in short supply. This is exactly what was happening right from the word go. So they were constantly the supply of metal was constantly under demand, under pressure, that people had to be paid, and they couldn't live under long-term debts like this. He also suggests that we had a serious debate of what coins look like and what coins should weigh. And in his consultations, we talked to the local banians and sheriffs. Sheriffs is of course shroffs. And these were of course the traders and the money professionals. And all coins, they decided, were to be made at par with the standard of Surat, because Surat is the font of all trade at this time. So they said that we should make coins which will commensurate with the standards that were circulated. And that way they had a greater chance of passing more currently in the neighboring countries, and these neighboring countries were of Portuguese, Shivaji, very interestingly, and Deccan. So this is the reason why they thought that we should have coins made at par with Surat standard, because they would be more acceptable in there. And very interestingly, it also says that we designedly give the coins English names for this, because we want to ensure that the people should learn English really, and and teach them English tongue, and to disuse the Portuguese as much as we can. So there is this interesting linguistic politics happening at this time as well, as you can see from these, that they want the inhabitants of English Bombay to speak English and forget Portuguese that was being current there for nearly more than 100 years by that time. Ongier then gives the equivalence. So 11 tinnies make one copperoon, and 48 copperoons make an anglina. This is, you just change the names here and you get the kind of equivalence. 11 bajruks would make a paisa, and 48 paisas would make a rupee, was the exchange rate. And this was the Mughal exchange rate that they were trying to follow. And which is they say that this is the current rate at present between the rupee, paisa, and bajruk. So this is what is happening. And at the end, they are very optimistic. And he says, this meant when thoroughly settled, we hope will raise a considerable advance to the revenue. So, this is again coming back to the same story. We want to make profits. Coins are profitable. Let's have them. We'll make them. What exactly happens is not not really. I mean, all their aspirations and hopes do not actually come to terms, as it were. What the coins were actually going to have on them, Ongier describes them in this. So as to the stamp, we concluded that for the gold, silver, and copper, the following. On one side, the Honorable Company's arms, and with this inscription within a circle enclosing the arms, and this is a Latin inscription, Honorabilis Societas Anglicana Indiarum Orientalum, written in short. So there's the short form of this. And on the other side, again, a Latin inscription within the circle is Moneta Bombaye Anglicani Regiminis Anno Septimo. And this means the coin of Bombay struck in the English rule in the year 7 of the English rule. And of course, this year 7 is 1672. So they are obviously counting the year from the transfer that happened between the king and the Portuguese in 1665. So the year 7 corresponds to 1672 at this time. And in the margins, it is written A Deo Pax et Incrementum. It means from God, peace and prosperity. So this is written in a report of Gerald Ongier, which is dated 21st of December, 1672. Lo and behold, we know the coins looked exactly what he says. And these are the examples of the first ever coins that were struck in 1672 in Bombay. These specimens are all from the collection of the British Museum. So, and that's why they are in such a super duper condition as coin collectors would appreciate immediately. The silver coins are exceedingly rare, not more than 5 pieces are known. I mean, it's a very, very rare coin. Only a couple of maybe 2 or 3 pieces exist in private hands. And you can see that it matches with Ongier's description verbatim. There is the short form Mon Bombay Anglic Regimes AO70 in the center, and it says that means the 7th year. Adeo Paxet Incrementum in the border. On the obverse side, the left-hand image here, there is the coat of arms, 3 ships sailing in tandem, and then this short form inscription on Soc Ang Ind Ori, which means Honorabilis Societas Anglicani Indiarum Orientalum, as Ongier describes. The same stamp is used on the copper coins, which is the copperoon. But the tinny, as you can see at the bottom right here, was a separate design. It has the bail mark of the company. This was the mark that the company was using to stamp its wares. And on the back, it says 1 and 72. 1 is, of course, denomination. 1 is a tinny, 1 tinny. 72 is the year in which it was struck. The tin coins are also exceedingly rare and not to be found very easily. The copper coins, by all means, were immediately successful, and they carried on striking the copper coins with the same design for a long time. So we will not talk a great deal about copper coins in this story because they were, they served their purpose. They did not, they did not give us any interesting accounts to talk about. And the first one, as you can see, the year mention keeps on changing. So the top left coin is AO80, so this is the 8th year, 1673. Then it is AO90, which is the 9th year, 1674. The lower coin has ANDO, which is anno decimo, which is the 10th year, which would be 1675, and so on. We know from surviving specimens that this design was employed all the way up to 1709 or 1703. The last digit is not very clear what it is, but it's probably one of the two. But right into the early 18th century, the same design was used. And it was then subsequently changed to another design around 1705-ish. We know from surviving coins. So the copper coinage was extremely successful right from the word go. What happened with the silver and the tin coins was a different story. Because obviously silver, the regime of silver was dominated, as I said, by the rupee. And the rupees were mainly Mughal rupees. And they all were inscribed in Farsi. These coins looked extremely, extremely different to whatever that was being circulated at this time. Nobody could read them. It had inscriptions in a strange script and a strange language, Latin and Roman script. Nobody was going to like them to start with. So, oh, by the way, these are some more examples of later tinnies. So, as much as the tinnies was struck in, say, 1672, this is a double tinny coin. You can see that it's called 2 and 75. This is from 1675 with the coat of arms of the company. And then there was a 1677 tinny as well, which is this kind of same design and has 77 on the back. So much like the copper runes, the tin was also not such a successful, but fairly successful currency. So there were these problems with acceptance that that arose immediately after that. And they were very different in design to circulating species, and therefore they were susceptible to refusal and discounting. When people did not like them, they said, "Oh, I'm not going to accept your rupee as a full rupee. If it was 48 paisas or whatever, I'm going to give you only 40 paisas. So take it or leave it." This was how the coins were traded at this time. There were some other serious allegations, and that they came particularly from Mughal governor at Surat, and he refused to allow their circulation because he said that these coins are different, and he accused them of not being commensurate with their weight and value to the Mughal coins, which they actually were. I mean, he was just being nasty to them. Here are poor British trying to actually strike coins. They think it is an honorable thing to strike coins at the same standard as the Mughals, but the Mughals are saying, "Oh, no, you know what? We don't like them." And they are not right. They are not right. Just go away. Just take them away. So, this was a problem. And the real reason behind this was that the Mughal governors at this time had a nexus with the Shroffs in the bazaar, and the Shroffs were sort of giving them cuts when the coins were being exchanged. And of course, they would get the cuts only if they carry on exchanging these coins at greater discount. So obviously, there was more than meets the eye in this particular respect. At the same time, the Portuguese were still there. They were neighbors. The island of Sashti, which is Bandra on northwards, actually belonged to the Portuguese. The British were only present in Bombay Island. So, or the 7 islands, little islands of Bombay at this time. And they were unhappy because it said that this is a company's coin. There is no reference to the king or the queen of England. So how can we trust them? This is we don't recognize these kind of companies of common deposit values. We want a coin to be named in the name of the king or the queen of England, really. At the same time, there was this other very important person who was gaining a lot of political attention at this time, and that was, of course, Chhatrapati Shivaji at this time. And they thought, well, you know what, this is a guy who's really powerful, and he is going to crown himself in 1674. That was his intentions were sort of divulged at the beginning of that year. So the British decided to send an embassy, and this is where we get their first parlays with any local power, as it were, to make to actually allay their anxieties about how would they get their coins circulating. And they thought, well, this is a new powerful king who's rising to the sky, as it were, and he might help us. He will say, okay, I will allow your coins, and that will mean that our coins will gain some acceptance. So they decided, of course, there were other trade-related issues concerning this as well to discuss. So a treaty kind of clause of about 11 clauses was drafted, and Henry Oxenden was sent as an ambassador to Raigad in May and June of 1674, just around the time of Shivaji Maharaja's coronation. And a classic painting by M.V. Dhurandhar, which shows a kind of a mental image of Oxenden sort of representing himself to Shivaji at his coronation. So the party arrives at Raigad on 23rd of May, and they immediately identify a person, an important person in Shivaji's court, whose name was Niraji Pandit, as an intermediary. So they choose Niraji Pandit to talk to Shivaji on their behalf, as it were. So Niraji has a look at the treaty, and of course it has this clause regarding coins, and it says Shivaji should allow English coins to circulate freely in his territories. And Niraji very earlier on suggests that Shivaji might not accede to this clause because he intends to start a mint at Raigad so he could avail the profits of the trade. So Shivaji, being smart, wants to do the same things that the British are doing. He wants to actually make money out of money. And he's going to start a mint so that he can supply coins on demand to where they are needed, so that he could also get help to his exchequer, as it were. We know from Oxenden's diary that Chhatrapati Shivaji and he met twice, once before and once after the ceremony. And then he says, he granted us all that we demanded, except this one last clause, and this was money going current in his country. So he says he refuses to accede to that particular clause. And this has been, in current historiography, this has been seen as a great indication of the sagacity of Shivaji Maharaj, to that he actually knew that this was something, he could actually feel that this was a clause that would undermine his sovereignty in any way or whatever. However, if you read further details of Henry Oxenden's diary, this is not the case. This is not the case why Shivaji is so keen not to let the British coins into his territory. What he says is very interesting. What he says is basically, he tells the British that if you make your money as fine and as weighty as the Mughals' money, it will go in my country anyway, and people will take it, because it's not up to me to force my people to take what coins they should use. This is what Shivaji is saying. This is a very interesting take, which might have come as a surprise to the British, because they were thinking that coinage is a right of the kings, and the kings could actually enforce their rights by choosing what coins they could circulate. This was not the case in India. This is a very interesting take. He says he can't force. I know this is an open market, common market, and people will trade in it freely as they trade in other things. They will pay their taxes when they exchange coins. They will pay their commissions, their batta or whatever it is called. And I'm not going to. So if he says to them, if your goods are worth what they are, people will take them. Who am I to actually tell the people that they should or they shouldn't? And this is actually, Oxenden finds that this is actually true, because when he orders some change, he says, we have experimented to be true this thing. In the time of our being here, because we asked for change, we changed some money there, and we find among the pies that arrived in change, they bring us an abundance of Bombay pies. So already the copper coins of Bombay were circulating in and around Raigad at this time. So Shivaji was very much correct in his saying that if people want, people accept, they would have whatever coins they want. I'm not the person who's going to interfere in this kind of market. This is not my job. So this is what the whole story of Shivaji was. Eventually, it seems that before they left on 11th of June or 12th of June, all the demands were acceded, and the coin demand was sort of not acceded or not refused. It was just left hanging, because he said this is none of my lookout. You can take your coins and make them circulate if they're worth it. The objections that were raised by the Portuguese then subsequently led to thinking of the design, and they thought, well, you know what, we should actually make some acknowledgements to the king, and so they struck these extremely rare coins. Only one specimen of this coin survives, and it is currently in a private collection in Canada. And this is the two C's design. You can see that there were Charles and Catherine, Carolus and Katharina were interlinked under a crown. And this was the design that was introduced or tried in 1674. And we know from documentary sources that the name Anglina that was given to silver coins was dropped at this time, or suggested to be dropped. And these coins were called ingresses. And this is, of course, a kind of an Indian version of the word angres. So obviously this was clearly a coin of the English at this time. The second design that was decided was this design which has this word Pax Deo, peace from God, in the center. And this was chosen because it was a much simpler design. So it had instead of, as we saw in the previous instances, there were lots of inscriptions. This is a much more simpler design, and it says Moneta Bombayensis in the circle around it. And basically, this was the design that was then agreed upon in 1675, and then we know at least struck until 1692, the coins that was ever struck in. This is also a very rare type of coin, but not as rare as the first issue of the Anglinas in 1672. A few specimens, maybe 10 or 15 specimens survive instead of less than 5. So all these coins are particularly rare at this time. In the meantime, they also decided that the coin for Bombay should be actually decided and designed in Britain, because on 5th of October 1676, the king, Charles II at this time, gave a letters patent to kind of a charter of trading to the East India Company. And in that, we said that we give you right to strike coins in my name, really. And it's the cost to be stamped and coined monies of gold, silver, copper, tin, or lead, with such impression and inscription thereupon to be made and be called by the names of rupee, paises, and bajruks. And it was supposed to be this right was given to the company officially by the king at this time. So this was all in response to the fact that they actually wanted the king's authority somehow to be reflected on these coins. So the designs were actually being made in Britain at this time. And we know that in 1677, the design was showed to the court of directors, and one of the directors took it to the king in person. And it is recorded that the king saw and approved of the design last night. So this was maybe in the middle of February 1677. This is what is happening. In almost a year later, things take very slow in this time. In March 1678, we find an entry that a person called George Bowers was employed to make the dies for coining rupees and to obtain engines, as they call them, to be sent to Bombay for coining the rupees at Bombay. They were not exactly engines per se, because they were not exactly machines. There were no machines at this time. But what they mean by engines is a screw press, which was operated by human power rather than or animal power rather than any mechanical device like steam or anything of that sort. But they still call it engine at this time. We know that a person called John Morris, who was an expert coiner from the London Mint, was employed to go to Bombay and to get the production started. And along with them, there were two other factors going on the same ship, who were called Samuel Annesley and George Cook, who were given some training to actually run this screw press, because it was a specialized instrument and it required training how to run it. They all arrive in Bombay in late 1678, but the experiment is doomed right from the start, because the person who knows the best how to operate the machine dies within a week of arriving in Mumbai because he was addicted to strong drink. So it's not very a redeeming feature for a person to arrive into this kind of tropical climate and just get shot by his penchant for strong drinks. So it is very interesting. At the same time, we also find that there were other things going on around as well. There were a local coiner just a year before is reported to he is said to have ran away with another man's wife. So there are all sorts of funny shenanigans happening around at this time that these people are involved in. And as a result, whatever the cause be, drink or women, the kind of production of money is always at stake. The other two guys who were trained to actually run the mint, Ansley and Cook, they cannot run the mechanical press. So the minting has to be abandoned, and they refer in their communications that you can't just get the coins right. The impressions are not right. They slip. They're not really handsome in their appearance. So everything was that. Minting was then therefore abandoned at this time. So this whole episode of causing a British rupee of Bombay was a very short-lived one. It sort of died in 1 year's time. We find it revived because in 1680-81, we find a record that somebody called Robert Smith was sent again to Bombay with new machinery at this time. But Surat objected to that. Again, you can see this kind of bureaucracy happening here all the time. Surat objected to it, saying that this guy is too expensive because he's got a salary of £60 a year, which is a massive salary, and we can't really afford him. So that is the end that we see, that coins were being stuck in the sort of European fashion using screw presses or anything of that sort. A few specimens of these coins do exist, and here are examples of a pattern, a strike that was perhaps made in London, that is on the top left. And it says, by authority of Charles II, 1678, the rupee of Bombay in the center. So here we find the reference to the old spelling, the Portuguese spelling of Bombay here. It's Bombay. And on the reverse, it has the king's arms, which is very interesting. These are not the company's arms anymore. They're the king's arms. And it says King of Great Britain, France, and Ireland around them. And lower below, you see an example, which is exactly what we find in Ansley and Cook's description, that we can't get this thing working. So you can see that the impressions are very weak on all these coins. The edge is clipped. The die obviously has moved. So impressions are not as clear as the first one. So this is probably an example, most likely an example that was actually manufactured in Bombay and not manufactured in the London Mint as ever. We know from surviving specimens that there were experiments going on with these coins as well. So we have a copper strike of this coin, which is made on a farthing of Charles II, which is dated 1676. And it's the same dies which are used to strike the copper coin, the copper farthing. And this must have happened in London. This specimen again exists in the British Museum. And in addition to that, we have a strike of the dies in pewter, which was a kind of tin alloy. And this was, again, a trial kind of strike to see how these dies were going on. So we have, apart from the textual mentions in the archives, we have actual numismatic evidences to see how these experiments were going on. In 1687, an important event happened. And in this year, Surat lost its importance. Surat was looted famously by Shivaji Maharaj twice in 1666 and 1670, we know. And after that, it just sort of went down the hill in terms of trust and safety. So the British then decided that they should move the company's headquarters from Surat to Bombay in 1687. And this particular coin was probably struck at that time because it has the date added in the inscription, Moneta Bombayensis, on the reverse. There is 1687 added at the end, and most likely this was a rupee struck to commemorate that particular move from Surat to Bombay. And this was the seedling of what eventually became the Bombay Presidency several years later. One of the ways to address this whole issue of acceptance was to issue your own coinage, which looks like the Mughal coins. And this was an attempt to go and start issuing Persian style coins, like the Mughals. And we know that this again was going on from a very early time. So in July 1674, very, very much earlier, 2 years within the mint was striking, there was a proposal made for the council to striking of another coin. And on one side, to have stamped in the Persian characters, the inscription Charles II, King of England. And on the other side, likewise, in the same character, Money of Bombay. So this was the kind of design that was envisaged very earlier on in 1672. And there is a reference indicating that some such coins were actually manufactured, and then they were sent to Surat for the council's approval at that time. But no specimens of these coins survive. In September of 1674, we find them discussing again this inscription that says Charles II, King of England or whatever. And they said that it should be changed to something more Farsi, like Charles Shah-e-Inglistan, something like that. Charles Shaw Inglistan is what they intended to put there. And there is, of course, there is debate and discussions going around at this time. And they're saying that we certainly realize that a coin in Persian character would make us a fair proposition, because it would pass in currency without loss or butter in your country. So, you know, if they think that if the coins look like Mughal coins, they would attract less commission or no commission even, and they would pass at par what with the British coins. Added to that, there was this other episode that Charles II's successor, James II, renewed the charter in April 1686 and permit the company to strike coins like local coins and on the same standard. So there is a kind of a little loophole here, that they probably mean that you could actually start striking coins in Persian here. However, they are very much aware that this is not the thing that the Mughals are going to like very much. Having said that, there are these strange coins that exist, which we are not very sure. The top two coins, we know now about 40 odd specimens have been existing. And we don't know who struck them. We don't know whether the inscription is not really actually readable. It's a very crudely written inscription. And it certainly has some English words in it, which are inscribed in Farsi. We don't know exactly who struck them, but there is a possibility that this was something going on around at this time. This was a kind of another attempt by the British or maybe another mercantile company to strike coins that look like Mughal coins in Farsi. The two coins at the lower slide are actually thought to have been struck in the name of James II. And the inscription on these coins is kind of reconstructed as to say, Sikka Zad Dar Jahan King James II. It's kind of written in Farsi. James II is written in not in English, but in Farsi. Not fantastically certain whether they are in the name of James II, but they are more likely to be in the name of James II than the top coins are likely to be in the name of Charles II. The top coins are surely not in the name of Charles II, but these are the kind of coins that people were trying to issue so that they would hope that they would circulate at par with the Mughal coins. What we know for sure is that in 1692 onwards, 1694 onwards, actually, the British did actually strike coins in the name of their own kings with Farsi inscriptions on them. So these coins are known to have been struck for 3 years, years 4, 5, and 6. And these are the regnal years of the King of Great Britain, who at that time was a couple. It was William and Mary who were ruling England at that time. Mary, as people familiar with British history would know, James II had to run away because of Catholic sympathies in the Glorious Revolution, and his daughter Mary then took over, but she was married to this Dutch person called William of Orange, and he came and he took over as William III. So they ruled in joint names, and the inscription on this coin on the obverse, which is on the left side in each image here, reads Sikka Zad Dauran, King William and Queen Mary. So this is, again, King William and Queen Mary are the words, are not translated in Parsi. They are transcribed in Parsi, and they're sort of written as King William and Queen Mary. On the other side, it reads Sikka Julus Angrez Shaheen, coin struck in the name in the year, the royal year of the British monarchs in plural. Shaheen is the plural of Shah, and below it says Zarb Mumbai. It was struck at Mumbai. This is very interesting to note that when the British actually use English or Latin, they use the word Bombay, Bombaim, or something similar. But when they employ an indigenous language that was being used in vogue in India, if not indigenous strictly. It was lingua franca in India. They used the word Mumbai, and this is the first ever instance of the word Mumbai ever appearing in a British context on coins. This is the first mention of that term. And we have a very interesting episode that connects these coins, because we, coincidentally, a historian of the Mughal court was involved with them. And this has to do something with the episode involving a famous French-British pirate who was operating in the northern Indian Ocean at this time, whose name was Henry Avery. And the story is that the character of Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean is kind of based on the stories of Henry Avery at this time. So, and he was actually marauding the trade that was happening between the Arabian Peninsula and the western coast of India, and mainly this was the traffic that was taking Muslim pilgrims to Hajj, and this was the most important route for Muslims to go on the Hajj at this time. Avery in 1695 looted a Mughal dhao, which was called Ganj Savai, and it was he extracted a lot of money from it. He got something like 400,000 pounds worth of cash and other things, and this is a massive amount of money in those days. And Ganj Savai happened to belong personally. It was personally Aurangzeb's property. So you can imagine what kind of fire these guys were playing. And when this loss was reported to Aurangzeb, the news writers of the port of Surat also sent him some rupees, which the English were striking at Bombay. This is the reference that we get from the history of Muhammad Hashim Khafy Khan. And it says with a superinscription containing the name of their impure king. So this is obviously the reference to the coins of William and Mary that's going on. Khafy Khan then arrives at Bombay. He is sent by the Mughal court particularly as an agent of Abdul Razak, who by this time is the Killadar of the fort keeper of Raigad. Raigad has fallen to the British to the Mughals at this time, and the Maratha Chhatrapati has fled to Jinji. Sambhaji has been killed. So this is 1690s. So Abdul Razak and all these people were engaged in trade. You know, they were actually, apart from ruling, they were also wheeling dealing in various things. So Khafy Khan then arrives in Bombay because in the Ganj Savai ship there were merchandise belonging to Abdul Razak, which had to be negotiated upon what the British are doing about it. And when he goes, there's a very interesting account of he actually going to the fort. What he does, he meets the governor, who he calls the Diwan of the East India Company. And amongst the conversations that they have, one of the things that they say that your intentions are not very good. You are very rebellious, and the indication of your manifest declaration of that rebellion you have shown is in coining these bloody rupees that you have, which are which are coined in the name of your impure king. So this is obviously you're trying to subvert the authority of the Mughal emperor. And the governor is very repentant at this time, and he pleads that this was please spare us. This was to avoid all these disputes that we were having with money changers, who say that all the coins are discounted. So these great disputes, we thought that they could be avoided if we actually start making coins which look like the Mughal coins themselves. Actually, the coins become a kind of ploy between the negotiations here, because obviously the Mughals want to exert pressure on the East India Company to get their dispute about the capture of the Ganj Savai solved, and the coins are kind of used as pawns to exert more pressure here. But interestingly enough, since Khafy Khan then subsequently becomes a top historian, we have a great detail of this account. In fact, before the coins were actually discovered in 1960s, we know that we only knew them from Khafy Khan's account. There was no other actual specimens existing. But Dr. P.L. Gupta, who was the curator of what was then Prince of Wales Museum, now Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, actually found the specimens of these coins for the first time in the museum's collection. And then he equated these two things, and that's how they were brought to light. The last reference to these coins we find is actually in 1697-98. Possibly then, even after this whole episode happened with Khafy Khan, the coins might have been struck in subsequent years as well, although there is none of these survive. We only know them for years 4, 5, and 6, which is 1694, 95, and 96, really. And we know there's an entry in the records, as the Mughal had been offended by the company's coins having Persian characters on them. The court desired that for a time this might be discontinued. So this was the kind of end of everything that they could do to make the coins circulatable. They tried changing the designs. You go back to the story. They were finding the coins were difficult to render, to put in circulation, and they tried everything. They tried changing designs. They tried methods to have the king's name improved. They thought that coins, if they're made in European fashion, they would be attractive. Nothing works. They strike coins in the name of the Mughal emperor using Farsi, and this is what comes up. So they are at their wits' end by this time. And throughout the first decade of the 1700s, the conditions are very pecuniary. There is no coins being manufactured in Bombay. The mint for silver coins has totally been stopped. Instead, they take a decision. I mean, you can stop the mint, but you still have to pay people. You still have to pay, for example, the soldiery, the employees of the company. They all had to be paid. So, what are they going to use in this situation? So, they take a decision to actually use foreign coins, to counter stamp them with the values that they were equivalent of, and then they would be used in circulation. These foreign coins were actually Spanish dollars, French crowns, ducatoons, which were Dutch coins, and Rix dollars, which was also a Dutch coin at this time. So these coins were then, we know from an entry on 24th of April 1705, that these coins were counter-stamped with English figures 2R48p. So it's 2 rupees 48 paisa. This was the kind of rupee equivalent of these coins, and they were to be stamped on this. We also know that the mint is now really in a tiled shed away from the powder bastions, and there is the mint has no proper place in the fort at this time. The only thing that happens around at this time is 1705 to 1717. They strike new design copper coins. So copper coins have always been successful, and they have been accepted because there was demand for copper at this time. So that was not such a big of a problem. So they could start making copper coins. Everything changes in 1717 when finally the British in Mumbai get a permission from the Mughal emperor to strike coins in his own names. Now one would wonder why this did not happen earlier. This is linked to a very interesting phenomenon which historians regard as the principle of extraterritoriality. This is a very amusing phrase. What that means is that since the British were actually own Bombay as their own territory, this was not a territory that they had leased from the Mughal emperor or any of that sort. They were actually owning it. This was their own part of their own territory. So even though the part of the land was contiguous with the Mughal emperor, the Mughal emperor's position was that because they are not part of my kingdom, I can't let you have coins in my name there. Why should I? My coins are current in my kingdom. This is not my kingdom, so my coins were not to be current there. In 1700s, particularly after the death of Aurangzeb, the situation in the Mughal court changed very rapidly. The Mughal emperors became subsequently very weak. All their local subadars and nawabs that they had appointed started acting more or less independently, started sending less and less revenue back to Delhi or Agra, wherever the emperors were based. And as a result, the emperor's position was to try to raise money from other sources of revenue. And one of the sources of revenue that he found was to actually delegate, franchise his right to have coins in his own domains. So he said, all right, if you want to strike coins in my name, you can give me a commission, you can give me a nazrana, and I'll grant you the permission. So this particular permission was finally granted to the British in 1717 by the Emperor Farrukhsiyar at the behest of his two extremely powerful courtiers, the Sayyid brothers, who were kind of running the show at Delhi at this time on behalf of the emperor. the emperor was virtually their puppet. So they managed to actually get the permission from Farrukhsiyar at this time. And this is the time when Bombay starts to prosper, because this is the time when they can finally have a coin that was acceptable to everyone around, and they could conduct their trade in money that was actually useful, as it were, and more acceptable, looking like all the other coins in the realm. So this came up as a kind of a intervention that was politically precipitated, and could be, then the British took an advantage of that. And this is the time when Bombay really starts prospering. So from 1717 onwards, the story of Mumbai or Bombay keeps on growing. Then Bombay enters a phase of a growth as far as its trade and other activities are concerned. So the fact that the British actually had access to an acceptable coin meant a lot to the local history and flourish of Bombay as a mercantile center. So to end this, all's well that ends well, as the story goes. As we've seen, the history of early coinage in Bombay is linked with the importance of Bombay and as a trading post and a commercial center right from the word go. For the first 40 odd years, when they struggled, Bombay was not flourishing at all. Only when they had a coin that was acceptable, it starts booming. So the story at this time also offers an interesting insight into how coinage was viewed by its consumers, people were using coins. British on one side thought, they would make coins, and the way they would make them pass. But the Indian rulers had very different ideas. Aurangzeb got angry when he saw Farsi coins. Shivaji Maharaj on the other side said, "I'm not going to fiddle around with your business in this manner." So they had very different takes on circulatory coins at this time. We also have an insight into how money functions. This is a larger issue here. How profitability using money as commodity itself is important. How trust and acceptance in payments actually lets money function. The British coins were not successful because they were not trusted by the people. And how the visuality of the design is a function of this all. Coins should look like as whatever was current. If they were struck with strange designs, having strange scripts and strange languages, they were likely to be not very successful. So the other story, other insight that we get into this story is because how a fledgling coastal economy and its dependence on factors like the import of bullion happens. So how this economy was being run, and how they were very much dependent on when the influx of bullion, and how the bullion was then circulated around to pay the debts of outstanding debts at Surat, or then strike coins or whatever. And at this time, it is absolutely crucial, important that it casts a light on the mercantile aspirations of the company in Mumbai. Profit is what it contributes to wealth. This was a kind of cornerstone of mercantilist philosophy, and we find this is illustrated in this story extremely well. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I'm open for questions now. So I'll stop sharing the slides, and then we can go over to asking the questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhandare. This is Farooq. I'm back again. There have been many interesting questions. I'll try to group them in some kind of logical order. Let's look at first the situation pre-mint. There are a couple of questions in that, pre-Bombay, pre-British, so to speak. There was a question about, do we know where the mint was believed to be located in Vasai? You mentioned a mint in Vasai. So
yes, there was a mint in Vasai. We don't know exactly where it was located. It probably, in all probability, was located in the fort, but not at this time. I mean, the evidence that we have of a mint in Vasai is later, is 18th century.
All right. There were 4 people who wanted to know, do we know where the East India House was? This was also answered by one of our future speakers who has a naval connection. He mentioned that it was close to what we now know as the old customs house. Would you care to corroborate that?
I've heard a similar story that it is actually that building which has the Admiralty inscription at the bottom, opposite the old customs house. Yeah, on the other side, opposite as in, it's Bhagat Singh Road, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. When you start walking from Rampart Row down to Horniman Circle,
Yes.
there is a building on your left-hand side which has a plaque, which is something to do.
It's
Are
near
you
the
talk-
Kama house.
Are you talking about
ahead of Kama House. Ahead of
Near
Kama.
Kama house, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you talking
so
about
that
the
was
one
apparently,
which is near those sanitary ware stores?
Right next to the Kama house.
stores.
Actually.
He is
It is-
talking about
it is-
Great Western Hotel.
No. Is it Great Western Hotel? I don't know. There used to be a designer showroom of some.
Anita
Yeah.
Dongre.
So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
are indeed talking about the same one, which the Admiralty House, which is also a hotel.
Right.
Going
So
back to
apparently, that was the. I mean,
Right.
I've heard that was also one of the contenders where the East India House was originally there.
I see. Okay. The other question, which is related to the pre-British times, is the following: where did you say you said that there were manyas which were operating in the city and they were using some kind of medium to trade. Where would they have been operating from pre-British times? In what part of the, or what we
I
now
would
know as
imagine in pre-British times, the center of activity was more local to Mazgaon. I mean, like, or just outside the fort. I mean, there was a kind of, in all these medieval forts, you find that there were bazaars just outside the fort walls.
Mhm.
So they would probably be operating there. But there were other local. I mean, Mahim was a major port at this time. So they would function where money is required, where trade happens. So
Okay. So there was a question from Kaizad. He wants to know, how was the exchange rate calculated when all the shops were operating? How did they arrive at a particular exchange rate?
That is a very good question. The exchange rate was in principle, it should have been calculated on the actual content of silver in the coin. So we are talking at a time when all currency is real currency. It's not, there is no token currency. The coins are worth what they are actually in hard metal terms.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a rupee, it has to be 1 tola of 95 to 99% silver.
Mm-hmm.
So the Shroffs had developed, this is not, they could not actually mechanically analyze these coins, but they had their ways and means to actually discount the coins. So, for example, the coin was old. If it was worn, then that would mean that it has lost metal. So obviously, then it was not worth the full price. So that was one of the ploys. So only the coins of the current year were valued as full rupees, let's say. If the coins were 3 years old, 5 years old, 10 years old, then they would be discounted.
Okay. Going back to your the pictures where you showed about the seraphim and the hairpin-shaped coins.
Yeah.
Somebody wanted to know what was the exact local name of the hairpin coin and the coin struck at Dabol.
Larin.
That was the Dabol coin?
Yeah, Larin. They're called Laris.
Okay. And Bharat wants to know whether the etymology of Seraphim is Ashrafi.
Yes, Ashrafi or Sharafi, which is basically, was a gold coin to start with, but it also means noble. So, that is, the etymology was definitely from, something which is a noble coin.
Nikhil wants to know, where was the metal that was used for these pre-British coins? Where were they mined? What was the metal and where were they mined?
Mainly brought in from trade. I mean, tin came from Portuguese colonies in Malacca. Silver came all the way from South America via Europe. So, there is a big story about how metals moved in this time. Copper came at this time mainly from Japan, and there were various mercantile companies or agents or agencies which actually specialized in it. For example, tin was mined also in Cornwall in Britain. So the British played a role in tin trade, but it was also mined in Malacca. in Malaysia. So, and that particular part was under Portuguese control. So, and so that was a kind of big trade between tin in between Goa and Malacca, because both were Portuguese places. Similarly, copper was brought mainly from Japan at this time, and the Japanese trade was very much in the hands of the Dutch. So they had, all these interesting aspects of metallic movements.
So the 17th century was also a very global century for us.
Oh, absolutely, certainly, because, and that's, I mean, one of the stories is kind of related to the story of the rupee is that the story of the dollar, because the dollar originates at this time in South America. I mean, and then the silver that is mined out of South America is then traded to Britain. From Britain, it is traded to India and China for the exchange of spices. So it's certainly very much a global story.
Nikhil was amazed that there were Latin inscriptions on the British coins. Latin, he believes, is closer to Portuguese. So how come the British were using Latin on the coins?
I think the Latin was used because it was the liturgical language.
Yes.
So it is like what Indian elite would regard Sanskrit.
Right.
So
I think that answers Nikhil's question. Bharat reminds us that today is the centenary, is an anniversary of Shivaji
indeed,
Maharaj's
yes, indeed. Is the coronation's the same day as coronation? Yes, indeed.
Yes.
So yes,
so that's quite a milestone.
Henry Oxenden would have been chatting with Shivaji on this day.
Yes. So if the coins were struck in Surat, the coins were struck in the Bombay Mint, what was being used in Surat?
Mainly the British, the Mughal rupees.
The Mughal rupees. It was
not. I mean, basically everything circulated everywhere. This is exactly what Shivaji is telling them. Says that if you want to compete with the circulating currency, you have to take the responsibility of making it acceptable. I'm going to intervene.
So there's a related question. Somebody wanted to know, like, okay, we know about the Bombay Mint. What was the coinage used in the Madras Presidency and the Calcutta Presidency?
Different coinages. I mean, Calcutta does not start producing coins until quite late. But, Madras certainly has its own coins at this time.
Own coins,
yeah,
which were different and
which were based on the South Indian currency system of cash and fanams, and it was a very different currency system. And that was not influenced by the Mughals at all at that time, because that part of South India was not under the control of the Mughals at that time.
We have an antique lover in our midst. Ankur wanted to know if there are any casts or stamping machines from that period which still survive. Maybe he wants to buy some, Ankur?
I mean, frankly, the coins which I have showed are so rare. I mean, it's our fortune that they survive. I mean, let alone let alone actual making machinery or anything of that sort doesn't survive. Yeah.
So Kanish's observation is that the people were not really very educated at that time. How will the what he calls illiterate people determine whether the coins were genuine?
They would not. They would take them to the shroffs.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the shroffs played a very important role in circulating coins.
We see all those Western...
Pardon?
I'm sorry, please go on. Nothing could?
No, nothing could escape their pincers, as it were. They were a very important community and a very cunning one at that. I mean, if you see the records, they're absolutely full of, praises for the Shroff community. Yeah.
Nikhil was asking if all those negotiations that you spoke about between the British and the Mughals, was that in the backdrop of the Anglo-Mughal wars of 1686 to 1690?
Yes, I mean, those wars actually had muddied the waters quite a lot. And on top of it, to find that the British were also striking coins in the name of William and Mary must have been, quite an affront. Yeah.
Okay. And so, two related questions by two different people. who arbitrated between the British and the Mughals, and what was the Nazrana finally paid to Farrukhsiyar for this grant of this concession to
there is an account of this available. I don't remember the names offhand, but there was certainly what you may call it as an embassy, a representation that was sent.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, one of them was called something like Nathaniel Stevenson or someone like that.
Okay.
So, but there was, I mean, it was officially orchestrated. It is documented. You know, I can look at the references and then forward them later.
We have an amateur historian in our midst, Mr. Chandrasekhar Nene, who's going to speak to us tomorrow on Pratapgarh. He says that the British also offered to manufacture coins for Shivaji, which was vehemently turned down because, according to Shivaji, this was the royal prerogative, and it should be outsourced.
This is precisely what I don't see. I mean, if I read my sources rightly, there is no mention of the British striking coins for Shivaji. Shivaji says to them, "I want to strike coins."
Yes, that's exactly what he says. He said
but he does not see this as a royal prerogative. There is no mention of the word prerogative here. Mm-hmm. Even Shivaji Pandit tells them that Shivaji wants to strike coins. He says that he wants to do it for profit. And Shivaji, when he's negotiating this particular clause, mm-hmm. he said that I'm not going to intervene. So he's obviously he's not seeing this as a prerogative aspect. He says that this is something which is a market thing, and I'm not going to intervene the market. The market will take its own course. So in a very funny way, Shivaji is a kind of laissez-faire capitalist at this time.
I was about to make that observation that he believed in the market.
I mean, he leaves things to the market, which is quite nice. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So who was the director of the Prince of Wales Museum who discovered the Khaki Khan coins?
No, it was not the director. It was a numismatist whose name he's kind of our big name in our subject, whose name was Parmeshwar Gupta, and he was working as the numismatist in. He was in charge of the coin collections in Prince of Wales in the 60s.
All right.
So he discovered it, and of course we knew from Khaki Khan's account that this was what was going on, but there were no coins to add to that. So, and they were very rare. I mean, they still continue to be quite rare. So.
Not a question directly related to the mint, but somebody wanted to know how much of the decision to shift the base from Surat to Bombay was a result of Shivaji's raid on Surat.
It was not a direct outcome of that, but it certainly destabilized the whole thing. I mean, the move, the decline of Surat was because of 2 or 3 reasons. And one of them was this, that, you know, the Shivaji's raids did show that it was a vulnerable place. So obviously, you know, tradesmen were not really willing to put their money on that place anymore. Mm-hmm. But there were also other instances in, like, you know, for example, there was a protracted war in, you know, I mean, after 1670, the entire focus of the Mughal starts getting fixated on on Shivaji on one hand and the Deccani Sultans on the other hand, the Adil Shahis and Qutub Shahis. And Aurangzeb wants to get rid of them because they're Shia. So as a result of that, the entire power dynamics in that region gets very destabilized.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nikunj wanted to know that is it true? He has heard that there are craftsmen in Murshidabad who can duplicate antique coins such as these.
Yes, there are craftsmen everywhere, not just in Murshidabad.
All right. Any recommendations for books where you can read about local money changers and their methods, the shops, for instance?
Not a book, but there are various books that one can, I mean, as far as coins are concerned, as I mentioned to Paul Stevens' book that I have used quite extensively for this presentation. It has a lot of documentary details. There is not a narrative as such. There is no single narrative. There are lots of sources which are published, and you got to sort of create your own narrative out of those sources.
So we got a fan of Gerald Ongier in our midst. His name is Vinayak Talwar, and he wants to know if, in your opinion, Gerald Ongier gets the credit for setting up of the Bombay Mint.
Yes, he does. There is something which I did not show in the presentation. There is actually a trial strike, a piece of copper in British Museum, where on one side there is the coat of arms of the company, which is the same design as you see on the coins. But on the other side, there are letters GA.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the initials of Gerald Ongier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So obviously he's definitely kind of involved in this on a very individual level.